Welcome back to the most electrifying IDP fantasy football show in fantasy football entertainment. I am your host, Rohit Brad, and we are the IDP Heatseekers. Yes, I did rip off the Rock's entrance. The old school wrestling fans, well, I don't play old school anymore, but it might be. Some kids these days may not know The Rock as a wrestler, but I do. That was my glory days. With me, as always, two of the greatest IDP minds this side of the Mississippi. Kraig, Reith, and Austin. How are you guys doing? Mr. Reith, I'll start with you. How is Monday treating you today, my friend?
It's fantastical. I'm glad you're back from your sabbatical. I know you were busy recovering after the big birthday last week, but glad to see you survive.
I do appreciate you guys holding on the fort. I was actually at a pastor's conference for 3 days, but
Close enough.
my birthday was. At this point, when you get to my age, your birthday recovery is more you ate too much ribs and delicious grilled food, so you need to recover from that. But needless to say, you guys did an excellent job. As I have to edit our podcasts and get them ready, I did get to listen to y'all, and you did an excellent job as always. Austin, how are you, my friend? How's the world treating you?
I'm good. Back again on a Monday. Excited about a mock draft that we had today. Going to be a fun show, of course. So, yeah, life's good for me on a Monday.
And even more excited that Sleeper's ADP is freshly updated. Anybody who follows Sleeper on Twitter, we use Sleeper when we do our mock drafts. And tonight was perfect timing for Sleeper to get their ADP updated because we don't have this 12-team full, which is fine. It happens, especially if the ADP is updated. That makes it easier to say, okay, we can let some of these teams auto-pick because this is a Superflex PPR IDP rookie mock draft tonight. So it's going to be a fun night tonight. Their ADP is updated, and it does look as though these teams that will auto-pick will wind up picking players probably where they should go. So we're not too terribly concerned with that, but we wanted to we did a 1 QB rookie mock a few weeks back. If you haven't watched that, shameless plug, go watch it here on YouTube. Make sure that you guys check that out as well if you need the 1 QB version, or go to rotoheat.com. Our rankings are there. We update them on the monthly, so everything's nice and clean and updated for you guys if you need some help, or if you're just in leagues with us and you want to snipe our picks, you can see who we would take. You can do that as well. With that being said, we're going to fire it off. You're going to see that Austin picks in this 2 spot. I'm in the 11, and then Craig's in the 12, and we'll kind of banter about these picks. We're going to go 5 rounds so that we can try to get some deep IDPs. We're going to try to get through all 5 rounds during the show, which we had no problem with the 1 QB, so I'm sure we'll be fine here. Whenever you want to start, Craig, you are more than welcome to. I see everybody. It looks like everybody minus the 1-1 has jumped in, which we do appreciate. We love hanging out and chopping it up with everybody in the community. This will be fun. I've got some drafts that are currently drafting, so we will have, and I've even been publishing some articles of drafts that I've been doing, so that folks that are checking the site out, because we have a lot of folks jumping to rotoheat.com, you can see who we're seeing drafted. With that being said, Craig, go ahead and fire this thing off. Austin, have you seen anything crazy when it comes to IDPs being drafted early? So far, the earliest I've seen is me taking Aiden Hutchinson at the 2-6. What are you seeing?
Wasn't someone – I don't remember where they were talking about this, but weren't you engaging with someone who was talking about drafting somebody like at the 110?
Yeah, I think in Discord, shameless plug, we have a Discord where you can talk IDP with all of us all the time. Somebody was talking that it was happening at the 110 spot. Actually, the 110 and like 2-1.
I'm so disappointed.
So, Craig, is there anything that you've seen? I don't know how deep you are into your drafts. I think I'm about halfway through all my rookie drafts at this point. What are you seeing? I think Craig's frozen on me. Oh, there he is.
Yep.
He's chopping.
Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, there you are. Welcome back. So what are you seeing in your rookie draft so far? Oh, we lost him again.
Yeah, we may let Kraig get right.
Your turn to pick. You can do that. Kraig can get right.
I'm so disappointed. I thought I don't know why he didn't take Kenneth Walker. I was really hoping Brees would follow me, but I picked
those are kind of the top 2 that I'm seeing going. Look at that. So Kenneth Walker and Brees Hall I've been seeing going early. A lot of rookie drafts.
Yeah.
Top 5.
Yeah, and I took that second spot because there's been a lot of talk about who maybe should be that 1-2. I think a lot of people are taking Kenneth Walker. I actually took Kenneth Walker in one of my own drafts, a real draft. So, I can't say too much, but I hate the offense for Drake London, but I love the player. And I think, redraft is forever, dynasty is not. And so let's roll with that.
Yeah, I have 0 shares of Kenneth Walker. I have 0 shares of Breece Hall. I mean, I don't know that I'll get any of those shares at this point, just because it's really, I'm not sure I want to take even in a Superflex format. I'm not sure I'm taking either of those guys top 2, top 3, which is where I typically see him going at the 4 spot. That's probably the latest I've seen Kenneth Walker go in any of my leagues, at least.
Yeah.
And then we see Garrett Wilson.
Can you hear me now?
Jameis. Oh yeah, Kraig's back. Kraig.
Hello.
My camera does not it's not functioning well when my camera's on, so we'll try it again in a little bit. I have not had any IDP drafts start so far for rookies, so
there you go.
Nothing
He's
there.
0 help right now.
But I did want to note for this too that we're considering this defensive line, linebackers, defensive backs, not specific broken down positions, 2 of each with a flex and balanced IDP scoring, because that can matter.
This is super flex, so I've been taking CXK. You get us. I'm taking Kenny Pickett in super flex in the kind of in the 7 to 10 range. Typically is where I've seen him go. I think I took him at the 7 spot. I think I've taken him at the 8 spot as well. So that's all right, Anthony. You can jump on with us next time. It's we try to do these. I know we're going to be doing some more mocks on streams, as we go, and then once we get to redraft season, we'll be doing some redraft mocks so that we can make sure folks are having the opportunity to see what their friends in the community do, what their peers and what the other managers are doing. So you'll see us finish out. So I want to talk about Pickens at the 112, Kraig. I want to give you the floor on this because people seem to be debating how they feel about Pickens, how they feel about the landing spot. I mean, what do you like about Pickens that makes him a first-round pick for you?
To me, he's the most talented wide receiver in the draft class. If you just go off of God-given talents, he had injury concerns, and then he had some off-the-field concerns. I kind of understand why he fell, but if we're talking about just pure talent, taking best player available, he's the best wide receiver in those sort of terms for me. No, I'm not taking him, at the start of the drafts either. There's other reasons, draft capital can play into it. And I think there are some legitimate concerns with him. But at the end of the first, I'm certainly willing to take him there over a guy like, Christian Watson, who, went to a nice situation, but is still largely just unproven. He's a complete physical specimen for what you want for a wide receiver, but he hasn't put it together as far as at that high level of competition. And he's going to a quarterback who notoriously doesn't use rookie receivers. And once he drops a ball or two, we'll see if he gets thrown to the doghouse.
Yeah, I've been buying Amari Rodgers wherever I can. Positive reports are coming out. He's now year 2. He's probably their most seasoned receiver that I think still has talent. No making fun of Cobb. Lazard's fine, but I do want to recap round 1 as we're getting partway through round 2 already. 1-1, we saw Breece Hall go, then Drake London, then Traylon Burks, Kenneth Walker, Garrett Wilson, J-Mo, so Jameson Williams, Chris Olave. We saw James Cook go at the 1-8, 1-9, Sky Moore, which is awesome. I love to see Sky Moore. He's been kind of one of the more all over the place draft picks. I've seen him go early, kind of right around here, 1-7, 1-8, 1-9. I've seen him all the way in the middle of the second round. So he's really an interesting player to look at. Isaiah Spiller at the 110. I took Kenny Pickett at 111. Then we saw George Pickens at the 112. So definitely the first round. And I've yet to see in a Superflex IDP any IDPs go before kind of early to mid-second. So this is really where we're seeing it at. And we see Christian Watson at the 2-1, Malik Willis at the 2-2, Damian Pierce at the 2-3. He's a guy that I have a lot of shares of. Like, not expecting that early on, but I have a lot of shares of Kenny Pickett or Damian Pierce. Sorry, I do have Kenny Pickett shares too. Then Jahan Dotson at the 2-4, Aiden Hutchinson, so our first IDP at the 2-5. Then Kyle Hamilton, then Kayvon Thibodeau, Trey McBride, the tight end from Arizona. So we start to see a little runs. on the top IDPs. Austin, break this down. What do you think about? How do you feel about kind of where the IDP started going here?
Yeah, I was so tempted to draft defense there at the 2-2. I didn't really want to take Malik Willis, but then I'm just kind of torn on like the Rashad White, Dameon Pierce, some of those guys that are in that tier for me. So I went with the quarterback because it's super flex, and I was like, yeah, I might not have a crack at quarterback when it gets back to me at the 3-2, although I could be wrong on that. So I went ahead and took Willis, but Hutchinson, where he's at, I think it's a great spot. Like if that's where I was drafting, that's probably exactly where I would try to draft him at, is that middle of the second. Your defensive guys probably shouldn't fall much farther than that, especially like your top ones, because you start to get in this class of offensive players where, it's hard to sort out for me.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
And funny side note, as we're wrapping up round 2. So I had a 32-team league, so it's 2 16 teams, AFC, NFC, and we just started our rookie draft in this league, which is a full IDP, but not super flex. It's 1 QB with full IDP on Friday. On Saturday in round 2, it picked 6, picked 9, somewhere in the middle of the second. I took Aiden Hutchinson. Literally within 10 hours, I had an offer of a future first for him. So I'm like, well, I'm going to flip him for a future first. So I don't anticipate seeing that very often, but I jumped on trading Hutchinson and getting a first because, albeit I like him a lot, went to Detroit as well, which is nice to see. I'm not necessarily 100% certain if I can get a first for a guy that I like, but is still a rookie. I don't know, why not? I mean, if he has a down year, maybe I go get him for less than a first, right? Get him for a second or something and get for what I paid, and I'm fine with that. So to wrap up round 2, we saw, Trey McBride at the 2-8, Rashad White, running back Tampa Bay at 2-9, David Bell. Then I took Devin Lloyd at the 2-11, and we saw Quay Walker at the 2-12. And I think in Discord, it was Kraig that shared an article on Quay Walker. Talk on him a little bit, Kraig, because I know that you've shared a piece on him. So tell people why we should be excited about him.
So my opinion, and I know it's that season where you got to take rookie talk with a grain of salt, just because of that's the only thing going on in the NFL right now. But we've talked about on here how we had questions about with how the Packers have run their defense the past few years, how they're going to use 2 linebackers, if they're going to use 2 linebackers, what exactly the plan is. And they've come out and sort of said that, they haven't had the personnel that they felt comfortable to have 2 linebackers, 2 inside linebackers, true linebackers, if you will, on the field at the same time. And they finally feel like they have a situation with Devondre Campbell signing that large extension and then bringing Quay Walker in, who can just do a lot of different things with them. Someone that can run, cover, go out there and still be a linebacker if he needs to come up, but drop back into coverage and stuff like that. They think that they're going to be able to do that with them, and they have plans for using 2 linebackers more like that, which probably means, fewer cornerbacks, defensive back, safety, whatever they were using extra of previously, or, defensive linemen. So I'm sort of buying into, they spent that high draft capital. They're coming out and saying they have a plan, which is more than maybe some people thought. I'm not just going to assume that a team has a plan when they draft someone. Boy, to me, it sort of feels like the Jaguars don't, where they're saying they're going to be using Trayvon Walker, the number 1 pick, as an outside linebacker more so. Boy, I don't know that I necessarily think that's the greatest idea. So, again, my point is I'm not just going to assume the best with every pick, but the Packers are saying the right thing. They're building that defense. They're sort of turning into a defensive-centric team here later in Aaron Rodgers' career. So, yeah, at the end of the second round in a balanced scoring league, I'll certainly take them there.
Well, and a team like Green Bay would be smart to do something like that. I mean, as quarterbacks get older, giving them a really strong defense and a plus running game helps take some of the pressure off them having to do it all. So it's a good thing. Round 3 is in the books as well, so let's catch everybody up on that. We got Alec Pierce at the 3-1 wide receiver Indy, who's a guy that I have a lot of shares of, which I did not anticipate having a lot of shares of. But in my rookie drafts, he seems to fall further and further, and I'm willing to take a shot on a guy who's probably starting alongside Michael Pittman at this point, most likely. Then Tyler Algier at the 3-2, Desmond Ridder at 3-3, Sauce Gardner at 3-4, which this was an auto pick. So here's where I would say, okay, it depends on how your league is set up. Cornerback is a required position, and the scoring is set up in such a way that it would probably benefit. Maybe I'm one of those, and Kraig is still as well one of those guys where you rotate him in off the waiver wire in most cases, but it is what it is. Then we saw Zamir White from the Raiders, then Matt Corral, John Mechie, Justin Ross, Nakobe Dean, Trevon Walker. I took Lewis Cine, and then you wrapped it up with George Karlaftis. Now we're into the 4th round. Austin, talk about some of these 3rd round IDPs specifically. Obviously they would be the most important ones to talk to. So Walker, Cine, Karlaftis, Gardner, those are, and Nakobe Dean. Dean may be the most interesting of these guys because pre-draft everyone loved him, but then he fell in the draft. But then he kind of landed in a great spot. So what do you think about these guys that went in the 3rd round?
It's almost like we drafted the 3rd round in reverse, in my opinion. I thought George Karlaftis is a fantastic pick, and I love the Quay Walker pick. I love the update from Kraig because he got me scared a couple of weeks ago, talking about how the Green Bay Packers deployed their linebackers. But good pick. Lewis Cine. We corrected ourselves last week. It's not Cine, it's Cine. Love that pick too. He's one of my top. He's, other than Kyle Hamilton, he's my top safety. So I love that pick there. Nakobe Dean is a fantastic pick. I think that I just hope that he's able to find the field, easily. They do have a couple linebackers that went to Philadelphia that, we'll see how it goes. And then Trayvon Walker, he's incredible. So that's a great pick as well. Those are all great picks. Like you mentioned, the Sauce Gardner pick, it's a cornerback, probably earlier than I would have taken him. I would prefer a linebacker or a defensive lineman. I think it's a little early for him. He has a lot of personality, and that's great. But I think he's gonna be a lockdown corner when he gets to the NFL, and may not get as much action.
Yeah, and and depending on the teams you're seeing these corners go to, they'll get picked on as rookies potentially, but there's still so much unknown, and I tend to just err on the side of I'd rather look at other positions. And, especially, defensive back, linebacker, as you get later in these rookie drafts, I look for guys that have potential to get playing time. So at the 4'11", I took Christian Harris. He has no real competition in terms of long-term. I could easily make the case that guy's in the starting lineup at some point throughout this year, and then potentially long-term solution if he fits well in this Lovie Smith run defense, which is more Tampa 2, and the linebackers have to be fairly strong, athletic guys because they drop in coverage and they're kind of all over the place. But it's interesting how you see all over the place when you're looking at the 4th round. So we see Davis Price, running back, San Francisco at 4'1". We see Jermaine Johnson. They say linebacker. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if it was a defensive end for the Jets. I think that would be a better position for him, but anything's possible. He rushes off the edge well, so it could work either way. Then at the 4'3", Derek Stingley. Then we see Davis, defensive tackle of Philadelphia Eagles at the 4'4". Jalen Tolbert, wide receiver. Then we see Anderson, linebacker from Atlanta. Then we see Channing Tindall, linebacker from Miami. Sam Howell at the 4'8", Wayndale Robinson at the 4'9", Jelani Woods at the 4'10". Then I took Christian Harris at 4'11", and Kraig is currently about to run out of time trying to pick David Ojabo, defensive lineman. And that's a fun stash pick because obviously we know he's not going to play this year, or it's playoff times if he even gets to the team. He's probably on IR most likely, so he's a fun one to stash because pre-draft he was a 1st round pick. So, Kraig, talk us through this 4th round, thinking about these IDP guys, where they landed. How do you feel about these 4th round IDPs?
So, again, you kind of brought it up with the 3 and the 4, the auto pick. They probably would not have gone there even in defensive tackle required leagues. Jordan Davis is the popular guy, but for IDP purposes, he really has limited value. Same thing with the cornerback, although Texans probably are going to be on defense a lot again this year and get thrown on a lot. So in cornerback required leagues, Stingley might have some value. Jermaine Johnson's an interesting one. I don't think he has as much value as a linebacker. It's one of the things that I found interesting at the startup here when Thibodeau in the 2nd round went. They do have him as a defensive lineman, which I like him much more as a defensive lineman in leagues than a linebacker. I don't have nearly as much interest in leagues where he's going to be a linebacker unless it's still a really big play scoring type of league. Moving on, Anderson, we've talked about him a lot. You're probably going to have to wait a year or two to get anything out of him much, but I love the value there. And I see from the chat, Greenhorn had him queued up. If who gets through, whoever it is, took him there. Then Tyndall, another linebacker that's probably more so for the future, but a nice pick as well. And what did we have then? So Christian Harris, again, probably a guy that's going to be on the field a lot, even if he doesn't start for the year, because they have a lot of veteran linebackers on 2-year deals there. Houston Texans probably aren't going to be in playoff contention towards the end of the year, and they might as well get Christian Harris some playing time, so you should have an idea of what he's capable of, or at least get him experience if you're taking him this late in the draft. I like that a lot. And then Ojabo, it's really simple. I think he would have been in the teens, at least, in the real NFL draft if he was completely healthy with where we sort of saw those guys go. And you can get that sort of talent at the end of the 4th round, even if you have to stash him. He's going to be part of a sort of rebuilding defense, but the Ravens really beefed up that secondary where they're going to have a top secondary for, a number of years here yet. And then you add in some pass rushing, they're, I think, doing a great job of rebuilding that and trying to kind of go back to what they did when they had a lot of success with running the ball on offense and just having a great defense.
Yeah, I would say that everything that you said was absolutely accurate. There are definitely, some interesting stashes here, some interesting guys that could return value, later in the season this year. And we see as we move to the 5th round, it's all that. It's all guys that have potential, but you're probably going to have to wait and see. So we see Greg Dulcich, kind of a little mini run on tight end here. Greg Dulcich, then you see Brian Cook, the safety back, he's kind of a DB. To Casey, then Jalen Weidermeyer, Isaiah Likely, Khalil Shakir, Keontae Ingram, Chad Muma, Trent McDuffie, Brian Robinson, Jaquan Brisker. Now it's up to me at 5'11". But Austin, how do you feel about late in the draft taking these types of guys to stash? Or what's your kind of late round draft strategy? Are there things that you try to do at this point?
Well, I was torn between Keontae Ingram on my pick and Brian Cook, but I went with Brian Cook because I think he's going to be a starter in Kansas City. In the late rounds, I just try to look to maximize value. Some guys are going to start trying to draft for need, and when they do that and people in live drafts start doing those kinds of things, to me, you got to look at who's the most valuable on the board and just make sure you stay true to that. So I took Brian Cook more as like a talking point, but I would say like Keontae Ingram was kind of like on my radar. Some of those other offensive guys, it's just kind of, they all feel like flyers to me. So if I'm in that situation where everybody on the board feels like a flyer and there's not like one guy I can pinpoint and say, this is who I want to go get, then maybe I do start looking at that defensive value, which is essentially what I did when I took Brian Cook. I feel like I got, good defensive value there, hopefully. But yeah, this late in the draft, it's kind of hard to call, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, we have a lot of good defensive players there. Daxton Hill, he went later than I thought he would. Jaquan Brisker, definitely think Trent McDuffie would go later. But again, that's another one of those autos where they're just drafting defensive back and they're not really looking at, position and what kind of return those guys will have for you. So cornerbacks, I definitely prefer safeties over cornerbacks, but auto pick, it's going to do its thing.
Right. Well, and in my mind, it's you either take, if there's a guy that you love, so if there's players that you really like and you want to try to stash, or if there's guys that could potentially, because of situation, return you something better than, the draft slot. So in my mind, I don't love Jones, Velus Jones, Chicago wide receiver, but where they took him, he has potential to get some significant playing time. And if he does, quickly turn into something for them, I can flip him for better than a 5th round pick. Or, Brian Robinson, if the fumble issue that we saw with Antonio Gibson last year causes Robinson to eat into his workload, Robinson's going to get you better than a 5th round pick, most likely. Same goes with, with these DBs, Brian Cook could return you better than a 5th round pick if, he gets in the lineup early for Kansas City and same with Daxton Hill. Both these guys get in the lineup early and start returning you value. People might come looking, sending you a 3rd round pick or I've seen, late second, early third conversations in trade offers, for some of these later round guys. So it wouldn't surprise me. I tend to go either who do I love or who can I make a case and can give me more value. To finish off the 5th round, though, we got, where were we at? Chad Muma. Then we saw Trent Duffy at the 5'8", Brian Robinson 5'9", Jaquan Brisker at the 5'10". I love Jaquan Brisker. And then I took Velus Jones at 5'11", and the Dax Hill 5'12". So I do appreciate everybody that had jumped in and mocked with us. That's 5 rounds, so we got through it pretty quickly. It was less than a half hour. Kraig, talk us through this 5th round. Is there anybody that you absolutely love late that you would target in your rookie drafts? Because obviously we know that yours haven't happened yet, but are some of these guys on your radar as guys you want to try to snag late?
Speaking from the IDP end, since that's mainly what we're here for, and you can get that offensive content anywhere, including on Roto Heat other days of the week, like tomorrow. But for IDP guys late, I mean, Brisker went, if you're taking out the cornerbacks, it probably went, Brisker's going to go a lot higher, I think, in most of these drafts. And I think the guy I took hit Hill here too. He's a guy that might end up being in a starting situation sooner rather than later. So for those of you not, too up on IDP or anything, Jesse Bates is holding out. He doesn't want to play under the franchise tag, and it doesn't really sound like they're really close to an extension. And there's been some talk of potentially trading him and being open to it. If he does end up getting traded or ends up sitting out into the year because he doesn't want to sign and play under that tag, Hill is a guy that could go from some, slot and backup safety work to a starter on that defense at some point this year, which I think would be great value. That Bengals defense is, as good last year. It's going to be much improved, and that offense is going to probably, knock on wood, be even more potent than it was last year. Now that they're actually giving Joe Burrow what appears to be a competent offensive line to work behind. So Hill, I think, is a great value back there along with Brisker, and they probably go earlier than that. But a guy that you might be able to snag this late, that we've talked about based on where he fell situation-wise, Chad Muma. He's probably a guy that's going to have to see something happen in front of him to be really IDP relevant. But if you're in a deep league, you're able to stash him on a taxi squad. He's got that, great tackling ability, but he's also athletically able to move around and do things where he could stay on the field for 3 downs if he gets into that sort of position in Jacksonville. And, we might have to wait a few years. He did take Devin Lloyd in the first. They gave Foy Oluokun that big contract. So probably not going to be a right away guy, but in 5th round, yeah, he's great value there.
Yeah, and before we get to the Q&A part, seeing as I'm in the midst of this draft right now, I figured I'd pull it up and we can look at and see what all the teams are doing. 2-9 was the first IDP, which was me, and that's where I took Aiden Hutchinson. This is obviously not Superflex, so this is going to look a little different.
But then you see team name, Brad.
No. Commanders are stupid.
We're gonna get your team a new owner since you're not changing that team name here.
I'm good with that. All right, so we see Aiden go. Then we get some more offensive guys, and you can see I don't have another pick. I don't have a pick in the 3rd round because I had accumulated multiple picks as a rebuilding team, and I wound up trading them in the Aiden Hutchinson deal. So I don't have anything in the 3rd round. So you see a bit of a wait. But then when we get to the 215, we see Devin Lloyd go. So Devin Lloyd in this league wound up being the 2nd IDP taken after Aiden. So after that, we have Devin Lloyd at 215, the 16 team. Then we see Kyle Hamilton at 3-1. We got Kayvon. So then we start to really see those IDPs come off. So we got Kayvon at the 3-2, a little further down. And this is a 1 QB. So got QBs going in the 3rd round. Outside of Kenny Pickett, I wasn't really in any hurry to grab a QB. Nakobe Dean at 310, Quay Walker at 313, and then we're up to 315. I mean, so at this point, I've been talking to owners about trying to jump up to get some of these picks because look at the way our mock went. I mean, there's plenty of guys that I want to try to get shares of that haven't been touched yet. Karlaftis, Trayvon, Lewis Seen. There's guys here in the late 3rd where I'm like, I don't necessarily need so much because my IDPs are pretty strong in this league. That was kind of the easiest thing to fix in this league. But it's one of those things where Every league I've done so far, and I've done a few IDP drafts, rookie drafts so far, they've all been so significantly different. It feels like this class is just as all over the place on when to start drafting IDPs as they are on what quarterbacks they like in this class. Like, I mean, we saw obviously Austin took Malik Willis here, but I've seen in some of the leagues where none of those quarterbacks except for Kenny Pickett go in the first, 2.5 rounds. You're halfway through the third when you see Malik go. So this draft feels very interesting on both sides of the ball. Austin, where are you, in your rookie drafts? Have you had some going? Can you tell us who you're seeing go when it comes to your IDPs? Are they later, second, early third? Do you see a lot go in bunches? What are you seeing?
Yeah, this is pretty close to what I've seen. I mean, I say pretty close. Again, you have some autos that made some very odd picks to me, but it is what it is when you have auto pick on. Yeah, I mean, I feel like on my drafts, I think I've had 2 of them. IDP starts going in the mid second, and once they start going, they start kind of going on runs. So it's hard sometimes to kind of catch up to that. And then, if you want to get in on the action from an IDP standpoint, then what are you leaving on the board offensively? So, but this is pretty consistent, like with what I've seen, with a few outliers, of course. But overall, I thought this one went really well. It's funny, we've been talking lately ever since MFL changed their positional designations, and I think a lot of people are trying to figure out where these guys are going to fit in on these defenses. We talked a little bit about Jermaine Johnson, who's listed as a linebacker, probably plays better as a defensive end. That's probably his true position, but it's hard to place a position on these guys. I think because they're playing faster, they're playing leaner. They do so many things well that they can be put into that outside linebacker role and still be an effective edge rusher and be able to kind of do both, these hybrid players. So it's hard to put a nail on what exactly these guys are going to do when they do get on the field and start playing. So that's kind of one of the difficult things to nail down. So, and that's where to me, that's really where you start to see the values just changing so drastically. Is like David Ojabo, probably a defensive lineman. I've seen people call him a linebacker, So depending on how their designations are too, I feel like really changes things as you go later into the draft.
Yeah. And it feels like you should have that control to be able to set that designation in every league. I know in Flea Flicker and I think Sleeper, you can make that change. I don't know if you can in MFL. I only commission leagues outside of MFL anymore at this point, it seems like.
MFL can change.
Can you switch them? So either way, I mean, if you as a commissioner, if you don't like it, change it. If you don't think it makes sense, and you really won't know that until we get to camp, till we get to preseason, till we get to once the coaches start actually talking about what they're doing with these players, we're kind of stuck just guessing. So that would be the thing that I would err on the side of caution. If going into the draft and even on the team they're on, if things sound as though they're going to be one over the other, don't necessarily look at the position the way it's set now in MFL, because if you love a guy and you think he's probably more a DN than an LB and fits in that role, well, he might be. I mean, especially with a guy like Kayvon Thibodeau. I mean, everybody keeps saying he's a hand in the dirt guy just because he's listed as a DL here or maybe a linebacker on MFL. I mean, you got to be careful there. Kraig, any thoughts on that, in making your draft decisions based on that?
I mean, really, that's something that your league should have set up ahead of time. Some of these leagues, one of the big things on Twitter right now is talking about, because of all the weird changes MFL does, is that true position where whatever MFL does, some of these leagues go in and actually try to set what the person's true position is, regardless of these weird MFL changes every year. So if that's something that's set and there's a standard in your league for it, I do like that, as opposed to being at the whims of whatever site that you're on. But I mean, that's really going to be league specific, and I don't think most leagues are set up where people know each other well enough to be having a commissioner go in and make those changes manually, because inevitably someone's going to be helped and someone's going to be hurt, and people have feelings about that, which is fine. But we see every year, lots of leagues fold. We saw this past year, especially with, the pandemic sort of kind of maybe being over. A lot of people just abandoning leagues and having a hard time finding people to take over orphans. There's just a lot of that in general, and then people are just going to drop what they don't want to be in, or if they have something happen that they don't like. So I think most leagues you don't see that, but it is a nice tool to have if that's something that you're comfortable with in your league and who your commissioner is.
Yep, I'm actually doing that in man home league, like you mentioned. I'll know each other pretty well, but I took an orphan in a 14-team league, and the question was asked about, do you guys want to do true position? And we all, we kind of our opinions on it, but ultimately I think I decided not to do it in that one. So, one league does it, one league doesn't.
Yeah, and and it's to Craig's point, it's a great idea to have your bylaws and constitution laid out with all this information answered. Unfortunately, real world, it seems as though something pops up every year that you just didn't think about, and people then have to go in and add it. The decision has to be made, conversations have to be made, polls put up. If you're on like a group me or a Discord or wherever, you can put a poll up, everybody can vote, you can call it good, put it that way. Don't let this be something that causes chaos, though. Ultimately in the end, the goal here is to have a good time, to enjoy fantasy football, maybe make a little money, things like that. Don't get crazy about it. So if you are upset about it, voice your opinion, but don't get nuts. I've seen too many leagues, people quit because they don't like something that changed when everybody agreed on it, and they, pitched a fit and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, listen, have fun. Don't be a jerk. I mean, that's why it's rule number 1 in the Roto Heat Facebook community. Don't be a jerk. We don't want to hear it.
Wait, you bet money on fantasy football, Brad?
I don't bet money. I win money.
Not in the leagues you're in with me.
Well, it's because every league I'm in with you, I got stuck with an orphan that was like a dumpster
chose
fire.
To take an orphan. No one stuck you with an orphan.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I got stuck with it. I'm guessing before I joined, everybody took the good players and stuck me with the trash. Yes, and absolutely. Look at that. Ricky Butt's making an appearance. If you are not having fun in a league, you should definitely leave. Fantasy is supposed to be fun, right?
I got to leave every league I'm in with Brad. So,
well, it's because I don't know that you have fun. I'm still waiting to see. I want your brother to give us some video from Jurassic Park to show that you have fun, because I don't believe it. You're like that T-shirt with all the Darth Vader masks, the faces of the emotional Darth Vader masks, and you do it as a ploy. You're playing mind games. You're living rent free in Austin's head. I get it. But not here.
Does anyone pay to live in anyone else's head? I've always wondered that, because we're going off the beaten track here. I think we have actual questions here to answer, Brad.
We are. We're getting to the questions part. I did, and before we get to Anthony's question, I did jump on, and it looks like Blake Martinez. So Blake Martinez is going to be the focal point of this question here. Blake Martinez was at OTAs, moving around well, reported by Jordan Ranan over on the Twitter. He's got a blue check mark, so it must be a big deal. At OTAs, he was moving around well after he was still wearing a red jersey, but it looks like he's recovering well from his torn ACL. So, to that point, Anthony has a question. We want to get to it. After being injured for nearly all of 2021, 28-year-old Blake Martinez is closer to the end of his career than the start. Does he still got potential to be a top 5 producer at linebacker position? Even if Martinez doesn't finish at the top of the rankings, he'll be a solid producer. His value is probably an all-time low. Is he a solid trade target? Kraig, we'll start with you.
Yeah, depending. I mean, like everything else, what are you paying to get him? If it's someone who's devaluing a bit because of his injury history and his age, certainly, I mean, if you look at his production when he's been healthy, the guy's going to get you like 120 tackles, combined something a year. It's just a tackling machine. He was that way in Green Bay, is that way in New York, and they really haven't added any top-tier inside linebacker talent. They have a lot of, Tay Crowder was Mr. Irrelevant in his draft, and he's well exceeded that. And he could end up having a nice year, but he's not going to supplant Blake Martinez. We saw that when Blake Martinez got hurt, it was just a pile of yuck. That for fantasy, you didn't know week to week who's going to be starting and who's going to be getting you points. So I don't think you can trust Tay Crowder to take over that from Martinez. They got Micah McFadden like in the 5th and a whole bunch of other late guys. So could there be something in the future there, sort of where you get production by default? Yeah, but once Martinez leaves, that would be the only situation because Martinez is just going to eat up those tackles. They still have a very nice defensive line there to play behind, and they're improving those edge pieces. They have Z's, and now they got Cave on there. So it's going to be an improving defense. I have to think it's an improving offense. Seen with the new regime there, Austin seems a bit skeptical. So we'll see, but I think it's going to be a better situation. And as long as Martinez is healthy, he's going to get you 120-ish tackles in the season. So, yeah, I would go target him if you can get him relatively cheap.
So seeing as yes and no, you gave him the answer, to his question. What are you paying for Blake Martinez? What is cheap in your mind, Kraig?
Do we know anything about the league setup? I don't think it was really put in there.
No, he didn't put that in there. Let's just assume it's kind of your standard league with rotoheat.com scoring. If you go to rotoheat.com and search IDP scoring, you can do that.
If it's relatively balanced-ish scoring and you're starting like 2 D linemen, 2 linebackers, 2 DBs, and a flex, if I could get him for a third, I'd start off offering a third. But if you're a contending team that is weak at linebacker and you can get them for a really late second, by all means, I'd be willing to pay that.
I don't know. Because of the ACL injury and because this team is kind of in flux, I guess that would be the only situation where I'm jumping on him is if I really think he's going to be ready to roll and I need linebacker and I'm contending. Like if I'm kind of a middle of the road team that's trying to go for the playoffs, or close to getting to the playoffs, I think I look elsewhere. Austin, what are you doing with Blake Martinez? What are you willing to pay for him, and how do you feel about him?
He's been so consistently productive over the years, and this is the one time that we've seen him actually miss extensive time. Like he has consistently been on the field every play, every year, and been at the top of the linebacker rankings every year. So for me, I don't know that I would be willing to pay the same premium that I would have pre-injury. I do have him on one of my rosters. I'm very happy to still have him. I'm going to keep him on my roster, and I'm going to feel really good about the news that comes out about him, recovering well, moving well. Those kinds of things are encouraging because I think he is a great player. Now, if I didn't have him and I wanted to try to make a play for him, I would probably be trying to do so before good news starts coming out and then guys start to like him again. Try to capitalize on the people who have maybe soured on him for age is a factor, and then also the injury. So they're like, oh, he's 28, he's too old for my team, trade him away. Capitalize on those moments if you can. And for me, late second, like I'll take a shot on that. I mean, we're looking at what we took here in the late second this year, which in my opinion is a really great class. And, Devin Lloyd and Quay Walker, they're probably, in my opinion, better dynasty options. But, it all just kind of depends on your league format. And if those guys were even the guys that were taken that late in your drafts, maybe those guys would have went earlier. And, if you're looking at somebody, the Kobe Dean or, some of the other ones who went in the third, I mean, to me, that's a big drop off, and I could see Blake Martinez sliding right in there and fitting in.
I don't see Blake Martinez scoring less than Quay Walker or Devin Lloyd this year if their teams as set up right now stay the same. Now, of course, if Foy Luakon and Devondre Campbell get hurt, well, of course, then there's that potential. But as the teams are set up right now, which is all the information that we have, I don't see any situation. I don't think it'd end up being close, to be quite honest. So if you're a contending team, I'd certainly want Martinez over one of those two.
Yes, I agree. I would just say from a dynasty perspective, long-term, big picture, those guys are great options. But I agree with that 100%. And good clarification, Kraig.
Leave it to Kraig to be clear and concise. That's what we love about him. So looking at our labs, because I typically go there when I'm just kind of looking at the depth charts and seeing what's there. They have Thibodeau listed as a strong side linebacker as well. This is very disheartening that I'm guessing that New York is really going to look towards being a 3-4, and they're going to have Thibodeau rushing off the edge. But I was looking at that because I wanted to see kind of where their linebacking room is at. And, with Tay and Blake in the middle, I mean, as long as Blake's healthy, this dude's probably getting what's a good round number when you think 100, 110, 120 total tackles, I would guess. Probably mix in a little bit of, pass deflections, forced fumble, or a couple of those. I mean, he's set up to have a big year. And this is a team that has a good defensive line in front of them. If they really are going to be a 3-man front, you've got Leonard Williams on one edge, you got Dexter Lawrence on one, and then Justin Ellis is in the middle. Guy from Baltimore, big nose tackle. So they're going to funnel a lot to those linebackers to be able to get some solid production. If they stay a 3-man front. So, how do you guys feel about potential production for a guy like Blake Martinez if he's healthy, for 17 games? I'll start with you, Austin.
Yeah, so we're talking about Kayvon Thibodeau and what this defense might look like. Opposite of him, we're going to have Azeez Ojulari, who is a tremendous young player, in my opinion. Does a lot of things extremely well. I wouldn't be surprised to see the Giants use those guys, just kind of depending on what the offense is doing, maybe move those guys around because they do, different things. And I think they would complement each other really well. And like you said, I think that's going to help funnel things to the middle. I mean, that's 2 guys you got on the outside who can stretch the play, with their strength and speed, and force those guys to go back inside. They can rush and break the pocket down, force the quarterback to step up, and let those other linebackers make plays. So, yeah, I mean, I'm feeling really good about Blake Martinez's situation. I love that they've added pieces around him to allow him not to be the guy on the defense that just has to do everything. I think that plays into his hand, and the Giants maybe realize that, hey, he's getting a little bit older. He's coming off an injury. So it makes sense to do those kinds of things. I really like what they've done, and I think it's going to help him a lot.
Well, and just looking at his stats, I mean, those last 4 seasons before obviously the injury this last year, 144 total, 155 total, 151 total, sprinkled in with a little bit of forced fumbles, a couple of fumble recoveries, a couple of interceptions. I mean, maybe one a year could be the hope there for him. I mean, that's huge production from the linebacker position. So even if he gets remotely close, so if he's slow to get back going, and you put him somewhere in the 1 to 125, 130 range total tackles, with a couple of forced fumbles and an interception. I mean, that's, high-end linebacker 2 type production would be my guess. I'd have to look at kind of how linebackers fell out. Also, thank you, Anthony. You are the best. We do love having you on and hanging out with us and chatting. Kraig, what's your gut tell you about a guy like Martinez if he's healthy? Do you feel like he gets back to that close to 150 production total, or is he, do we start to see the wheels fall off because he's slow to return from the injury?
I don't know if he'll be slow to return from the injury or not. I mean, he's 28, so it's not like he's ancient here, even for a linebacker. And ACL issues aren't what they used to be for the most part.
For sure.
The other thing to really sort of consider is he sort of kind of might be playing for a contract here, in that he could be cut by the Giants with only, I think it's like $4 million dead cap after this year. So again, either way, after 2023, he's going to be a free agent, and he's going to want to be able to show that he's healthy and recovered and able to produce. So do I think he's going to be in 140, 150s with a bit better of a defense around him? Probably not that high, but in the 120-ish, like I think that's the number I said before, range, I think is completely reasonable for him. And he's completely solid, at least linebacker 2 for, pretty much anyone. So
yeah, I was kind of trying to pull up 2021 stats to see kind of where the guys fell out. To see if
I would expect some big play regression too with him. I mean, we talked about the tackle totals. I would agree. That's probably where I would put him, around 120, but I wouldn't be surprised to see some of that big play regression happen as well with Martinez. And that's not to say that, he's not going to be a great player for your team. It's just those numbers, like you said, they're monstrous. The numbers he had, it's top 3 linebacker every year. So
while you're looking that up, Brad, we mentioned a few times Thibodeau here. So, what do you expect out of him? I kind of feel like it's a similar situation to Azeez Ojulari because it's the same team. Clearly, Thibodeau is going to benefit from having a better edge guy next to him in Azeez, and Azeez did with with Lorenzo Carter having, actually a little bit of a decent year, but not a whole lot besides that. And if you look at what Aziz did, he played about 67% of the snaps, which is good for a rookie. Edge guy, he did play with his hand in the dirt a bit. They have that sort of mixed front. So I have to think they're going to do a little bit of that with Thibodeau and just not make him a guy just standing up only. That remains to be seen. But Aziz had a solid year overall for a rookie. He had 8 sacks, 8 tackles for a loss, and 49 combined tackles. I expect Thibodeau potentially, if he does end up, starting to have better tackle numbers than what Aziz did. But I think that's a good baseline for seeing what a good year would be for him. And if those two can grow next to each other, I mean, this could be a really dangerous set of edge rushers for the Giants for the next, 10 years, even potentially.
Yeah, and just kind of looking through, the linebacker production from last year. I mean, if he gets anywhere remotely close to, 125 combined tackles with even, just a couple of forced fumbles and a fumble recovery, even if he doesn't do an interception, I mean, he's pushing for back end linebacker 1. I mean, when you look at last year, a guy like Cole Holcomb was kind of, if you look at like kind of the top 12 as your LB1 group, he had 78 tackles, 2 for loss, 52 assists. So he was at, 120-ish, 130 tackles. He had, 2 forced fumbles, 1 fumble recovery, 2 interceptions. And, that's not far off from the type of production you could hope for a guy like Blake Martinez with healthy. Obviously the interceptions might not happen, but so he's pushing high end LB2, low end LB1 type production. So, if you can get that for a later round pick, in my mind, I really don't want to go much higher than a 3rd round pick. But if you're, depending on how your team's made and if you can handle giving up a late second, so be it. If you're really set on a guy and you feel like he's going to give you production that's startable on a weekly basis for you, why not? All that 20 minutes to answer one question. Glad we don't have other questions this evening, because we might be going all night long with that. But, we want to do our best to give you as comprehensive a picture on the player as we can.
Yeah, hopefully everything you need to know about Blake Martinez, all in one episode.
Short of calling his parents and asking how was he as a kid, I think we can.
I do want to say in about a week, you're going to see updated rankings across Roto Heat, but IDP as well. So if you're interested, with some of the shuffling, I know, speaking for myself, when we talked sort of about Quay Walker, I did move him up in my own with the positive news and the hopes and hope abounds in rookie season. And of course, it's that way for everyone right now. But I'm hoping that they do what they say with him, because I think he's a good talent and he could be a really interesting piece for that Green Bay Packers defense that just hasn't had that in before Blake Martinez. I mean, when was the last time they had a good number 2 linebacker there?
AJ Hawk.
I couldn't even name him.
I'm about to say AJ Hawk would have been the first name I would have thought.
It could be, but who with AJ Hawk? I mean, we'd have to go back and look at their.
Was that the Clay Matthews period, right? It was AJ and Clay were kind of their 2 big dogs in the middle.
Oh man, yeah, they had another guy too, and I'm trying to remember who it was.
It's been a while, anyway.
Yeah, it's been at least a decade.
Yeah, was it the guy from Miami? Was it DJ? I can't remember.
Was it DJ Williams at one point?
Williams, yeah. I don't know.
I don't even know what he even played though.
Yeah.
It's been a minute, that's for sure. And that's a struggle. I've already started working. I've posted in our team chat this morning. Hey, start working on your rankings, because if you guys are like me, man, when I'm sitting in my rankings and I'm just kind of trying to process where to move guys to or what to do with a player, like even after, as soon as I submit it and I'm done, I'm like, all right, go ahead and publish them. I immediately start going, all right, I don't like where I put this guy. I really need to move him around. Or I talk about, hey, I want to move this guy up because I really like him. But, this time of year is awful for that, because I'm always wondering, what if a guy like Quay Walker really does get used like Green Bay plans on using? Man, well, then he's got to move up to, LB1 or tie for LB1, with I'm drawing a blank at this moment, but move up there into the LB1 position, or and I love rankings. I love doing rankings. I always question it, because you can build the case that some of these guys deserve to be higher.
Yeah. I
He's a
think a
good
few
one for a
weeks
minute.
ago, when we drafted a mock draft, I think I took Quay Walker, and I don't think Kraig liked it necessarily. Like didn't like it, but just at the time was like, yeah, we weren't really sure on how the Packers would use him. But I was like, draft the talent. Like I love the kid, and that's why when Craig's bringing the good news tonight about how Green Bay may be able to use him in the middle, alongside, the guy Devondre Campbell. That's great news for me because I'm like, yes, I was drafting the talent the whole time, and sometimes that's just what you got to do because like we mentioned earlier, it's just going to be hard to sort these guys out and how they may be used, and that's kind of one of the risky parts of IDP that we just don't know sometimes, even when we think we do.
So going back to 2011, here's a name from the past for IDP players: Desmond Bishop.
Ooh, that is going back.
He had a good 115 one year, but they haven't had, as far back as 2011, two linebackers with even really close to 100 tackles. They usually have one guy that in the 110 to 120 range, and then they had a Jake Ryan year in there with like in the high 70s. They had Brad Jones with like 81 as their second linebacker. But we're already back 11 years, and they've had safety. So Morgan Burnett, Clinton Dix. They had some of those guys with really high tackle totals, but this is sort of the whole point of, where my skepticism came in when they aren't really saying anything and they're just drafting the guys. We haven't seen this out of the Packers. So, looks like 2010, they had Hawk with 111, 72 solos, and Desmond Bishop, 103, 75. So you're talking 12 years ago, the last time they had two linebackers with, I think, even like 190 tackles combined each. So.
Yeah, and out of fairness, though, like, could we? I mean, we're not going to do that now, but I would be curious to see what those rosters look like behind the number one guy. And like, they mentioned that we just really haven't had the guys, we haven't had the personnel to feel like this is something that we could do. So, yeah, I mean, it makes sense if they're being honest. Some of this is just you get to this time of the year where you wonder what's just coach speak, so to say, and so it'll be interesting to see what actually happens.
Oh, and for a lot of those years, they had a lot of the same player personnel in the front office. Green Bay is a team where the guys stick around for a long time in the office, and the guys making the decisions just didn't put the emphasis on multiple high-quality middle linebackers and a 3-4. Well, that's on them. I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. But if you want that type of production, you need to find those guys that can do that. I mean, and they just haven't, at least recently. So I hope for the best. I think Rashawn Gary is a really strong player. I think Walker's a strong player. I think, Chris Barnes is a strong player. I mean, they have guys that could potentially develop.
I think Chris Barnes is a strong player?
I think he could be. I mean, I think he could develop into a strong player. I'm not saying he is one.
Brad's throwing out a hot take in the last 2 minutes of the show here.
Hot take.
I think if they had faith in Chris Barnes, they aren't drafting Quay Walker with the first round pick.
But if they're going to rotate
Twilight.
Well, if they're going to rotate multiple linebackers, then maybe a guy like Barnes can do something there.
Let me see if I have him in a league. I'll trade him to you for future second or something.
I wasn't willing to give I was barely willing to give a third for Blake Martinez, but I'm going to drop a second for a guy who
apparently you don't believe in someone there in Green Bay. So I mean, you're trying to tell us what's going to happen here. So
they're going to have 4 to 5 linebackers on the field at any given time.
2 of them are edges. I mean. You don't like Rashawn Gary? Is Chris Barnes going to be taking over for Rashawn Gary?
That's it. The next hot take: Gary's job's in jeopardy. He's finally starting to show and starting to look like he's ready for the big time. And nope, they're going to boot him for a depth guy who could maybe develop. With that being said, Craig's Ridiculous show's over. We do appreciate you guys for hanging out with us.
I had hot takes here.
More hot takes.
I love
Craig's bringing the energy. I like it. The big Kraig energy at the end of the show. We do thank you guys for hanging out with us. RotoHeat.com. You can find all of our content, written, rankings, all that good stuff. You can obviously subscribe, hit the notification bell on YouTube. If you listen to this in podcast format after the fact, you can always write a review on your favorite podcast platform and tell them you love it. It does help all those algorithms with the magic and the robots on the back end. We do this every Monday night. We got a Tuesday night show. We do Devi on Thursdays, typically on the weekly basis, but you never know. Things pop up from time to time. we do thank you guys for hanging out with us as always, making Monday night special when we get to chat with you. And hopefully we've made your Monday night special as well. We thank you guys. Love y'all. Take care of each other. We'll see you later.